it's the travelling propensity of the world population which has caused such a dramatic change in the fortunes of language in the last 100 years, of all languages. People now move, and they bring their own language with them. And some people move so much that actually they don't actually have a mother tongue anymore. Some children are native speakers of no language because they've moved so much in the course of their early lives. But for many people, the first generation arrives in a new country, and it can be anywhere. America, of course, is the classic example of the population explosion at the end of the 19th century. Hundreds of languages in America now, over 350 languages routinely recognized in the censuses, and so on and so forth. London, another case in point, 307 languages now recognized in communities in London at the beginning of the 21st century. Something like 12 to 15% of the population of Australia now are immigrant groups of one kind and another. And the same thing's happening in all countries. And as a result, you get the typical three-generation effect. The first generation comes in and brings its own mother tongue and can't speak the language particularly well. The second generation, usually brought up bilingual, speaking very often the cool language of the country they've moved to. The one that's going to give them a better quality of life is the one that now becomes the primary language, and their ethnic ancestral language becomes rather secondary. And then the third generation effect, where the children very often grow up monolingual in the new culture, unless some pressure has been put upon them, desirable pressure, I would add, of course, to maintain their ethnic identity with a genuine bilingualism. Well, the result has been that in places like America now, you get an immense range of new varieties of the language: Italian English, Swedish English, German English, and so on. New accents, new dialects. And the language has, I would say, become enriched by this proliferation of incoming variety. Some people don't like it. Everybody has a sort of conservatism inside them where they look back to an earlier stage and they think the language was pure once, and now it's being messed up by immigrants. That is a complete myth. The English language has never been pure. I mean, from the very beginning in England, 1,000 years or more ago, 1,500 years ago, there were already different dialects and accents coming from different parts of Europe. Dialect change, variety is the normal state of all languages. And the fact of the matter is that as a language welcomes immigrant groups, I believe it actually grows in its diversity, in what it can express. It increases its creative potential because it's now sucking in, like a vacuum cleaner, borrowing words and phrases and idioms, locutions, accents, and so on and so forth, and making itself an extraordinary garden of diverse flowers. A language which is just one or two flowers is moderately interesting. 3 or 4, a language with 1,000 flowers is a wonderful thing. And English in America, I believe, has, and in Britain too, and in every part of the world really, as English has spread, has developed this kind of multitude of varieties, of species of English, which makes it all the more attractive, it seems to me. Now, all over the world, in millions of cases, there are new comings together of people. And the old distinctions between English as a first language and as a second language and as a foreign language are breaking down. You get examples like this. In the Emirates, where I visited a little while ago, I met there a German industrialist who had met a lady from Malaysia, and they had got married. He spoke German and English as a foreign language. The lady from Malaya spoke Malay and English as a foreign language. They courted and got married through English as a foreign language. In the home, they speak English as their common tongue. They have had a baby. They are now speaking English as a foreign language to that baby. That baby is going to grow up learning English as a foreign language as its mother tongue. At the same time, as English is growing in these different parts of the world, it is evolving new identities. New mixed forms of English are taking place. In Singapore, for example, you will hear Standard English, you will hear Standard Chinese, and you will hear Singlish. Singlish, Singaporean English, a mixture of English and Chinese and a couple of other things as well sometimes. There are dozens of these around the world. And the question is, how far are they going to take spoken English into a world of mutually unintelligible local dialects, so that English will evolve at that level like Latin did 1,000 years ago? At the same time, satellite is beaming down upon us now, CNN and BBC, so suddenly there is a level of lingua franca English coming all around the world. How are these things going to be resolved? At what level? The language is breaking up. At another level, it's coming together. I perceive a future where both of these things will happen. where in 50 years' time we will end up being in effect bilingual in English. We will learn not only written English as the world's standard lingua franca for written expression, printed English if you like. There will also be a standard spoken English mediated by some sort of amalgam of BBC and CNN and all the other things as a result of global mobility, and people will learn that as a standard spoken lingua franca. And then they will also learn at least one and maybe two local Englishes. One perhaps in Singapore for Singaporeans to use amongst themselves, and perhaps even another variety for Singaporeans using in some other circumstance. We could end up speaking 2, 3, 4 varieties of English. This shouldn't be so surprising. I currently already have 3 varieties of English that I use. The kind of English I'm using now is my educated British English, which I use in a British medium of educated communication. When I go back home to my house in North Wales, I will immediately switch, if I go down to the local market, into a local Welsh variety of English with Welsh loanwords in that I wouldn't dream of using now in a medium of this kind. If I go back to my other home of Liverpool, I would immediately lapse into my Liverpudlian Scouse expression and use all kinds of Liverpudlian expressions there. And if I go abroad, I will cease using my British expression to some extent. Insofar as in a British conversation I might use a metaphor from cricket or something and everybody would understand what I mean. If I'm lecturing in America, I will not use my cricket metaphor because nobody will understand it. So I have at least 4 varieties of English in my head now, and I see the future of English as being a world where everybody will be developing multi-dialectism in the English language. It'll be a much more varied kind of English, still a very universal English, but one in which there is a balance between intelligibility and identity.